Dad's face turned expressionless and Mom's eyes filled with tears. You're throwing away everything we've worked for, Dad said, his voice laced with disbelief. Don't you see the impact this will have? I shook my head and lowering my voice responded firmly, I do see the impact, Dad, but I have to live my own life, not the one you've planned for me. Glenn makes me happy in a way I've never felt before. I can't ignore that. Mom's tears fell freely as her voice trembled. We only want what's best for you. We thought we were guiding you toward a successful and fulfilling life. I looked at them. My heartbreaking, I understand, but your vision of what's best for me isn't the same as what I need for myself. I love you both, but I have to follow my own path. The conversation ended in a heavy silence. My parents, deeply hurt and disappointed, struggled to understand my decision. It was clear they weren't ready to accept my choice. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. Welcome to Revenge Scales, where justice always finds its way. Hi, I'm Mia Bennett, and I want to share a story that has defined my life in recent years. It's a story about family expectations, personal rebellion, and finding my own path, one that challenges the boundaries that were imposed on me. I'm 22 years old, but I feel like I've been fighting against my family's expectations for as long as I can remember. Growing up, my twin sister, Mel, and I were always compared to each other, and it seemed like she was always the one who came out on top. She effortlessly excelled in her business administration studies, easily fitting the mold of the perfect daughter. Meanwhile, I constantly felt like I was struggling to keep up with her pace, unable to meet the standards that were set for us both. Our parents, Dr. Thomas Bennett and Helen Bennett, were the epitome of high expectations. My father, a respected university professor, was known for his stern demeanor and relentless dedication to his academic career. He held himself and his family to a set of rigid standards, expecting nothing less than excellence. My mother, on the other hand, embodied the traditional homemaker ideal, pouring her energy into maintaining the family's pristine image. She believed that image was everything, especially for her daughters. They had a clear vision for what they wanted for Mel and me, but it never quite aligned with who I truly was. From a young age, I felt like I didn't fit into that vision. It was as if I was constantly being observed, scrutinized by the weight of their expectations. My father constantly praised Mel for her academic achievements, seeing her as a reflection of his success, while my mother insisted that I follow her example, be the perfect daughter, adhere to traditional values. It was clear to them that success meant excelling academically, securing a prestigious job, and marrying someone they deemed suitable. For years I tried to fit into that mold. I dressed the way they wanted me to, followed their rules, and did my best to be the daughter they desired, but deep down something inside me kept urging me to break free, to pursue my own life on my own terms. I didn't want to be defined solely by the achievements of my family, nor did I want to live my life in male shadow. I wanted to make choices that reflected who I truly was, not what would please them. It wasn't about rejecting their love or their guidance, but about finding a way to carve out my own identity, one that wasn't dictated by their plans for me. My small acts of rebellion were my way of expressing that struggle. Instead of wearing the conventional clothes they preferred, I started experimenting with bold eyeliner and more unconventional outfits. To them, these changes were met with disapproval, but to me they symbolized a step toward discovering my own identity, an identity that wasn't shaped by their expectations but by my own desires and aspirations. It wasn't easy. The pressure to conform was overwhelming at times, but each small act of defiance gave me the courage to take another step toward being the person I wanted to be not the person they wanted me to be. Now, as I reflect on these past few years, I realized that it wasn't just about rebellion. It was about finding the strength to live authentically, even if it meant disappointing the people I loved. In a way, that struggle has shaped who I am today, someone who is determined to live life on her own terms, not defined by the expectations of others. And for the first time, I feel like I'm finally discovering the path that's truly mine. The turning point in my life came when I met Glenn. I was in the university library struggling with an assignment. When he walked in, Glenn was a carpenter. In his 30s, completely unlike anyone I had ever met. He had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, and he saw the world with a sense of freedom and possibility. When he talked about his work and life, it was clear he lived on his own terms, unbound by social expectations or the rigid plans my parents had for me. We started talking more, and before long I realized how much I enjoyed being around him. With Glenn I felt free to be myself, no pretenses, no fears. One night while we were sitting at a cozy cafe near campus, Glenn took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Mia," he said softly, "I know this might sound crazy, but I see a future for us, a future where we're both free to be who we truly are." A wave of emotions washed over me. It was the first time someone spoke to me about a future that wasn't shaped by someone else's expectations. Glenn wasn't just proposing marriage, he was offering me a chance at a different life, a chance to break free from the mold that had been created for me and forge a new path together. When Glenn proposed, I knew my parents would never approve. They had always envisioned me with someone who fit their idea of success, a person who met their social and academic standards, but Glenn was everything they disapproved of. He had lived a life of spontaneity and freedom, far removed from the academic and social circles my parents valued so highly. Despite knowing the challenges ahead, I said yes for the first time. I was choosing to live for myself. It was a huge step, one that would eventually lead to some of the hardest decisions of my life. When the time came to introduce Glenn to my parents, I was filled with hit like on this video anxiety. My heart raced as I led him into the house, desperately hoping they could see how happy he made me, but deep down I feared their reaction. Dad was in his study, surrounded by piles of books and papers, barely glancing up as we entered, his focus entirely on his work. Mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner with precise movements, her expression distant and lost in thought. "Mia, there your Mom said as we walked in." Her eyes shifted to Glenn, narrowing slightly. "And who's this?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, this is Glenn. He's a carpenter, and he's very important to me." Dad finally looked up from his papers, his gaze critical. Glenn, ever charismatic, smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," he said, his voice steady and genuine. Tell us about yourself, Dad," said, his tone polite but distant. Glenn's smile never wavered. "I'm a carpenter, as Mia mentioned. I love what I do, and I've always believed in living life my own way. I know it might seem unconventional, but I think it's important to stay true to yourself." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, and Dad's expression grew even more critical. It was clear they weren't impressed. Dinner was tense and awkward. I tried to steer the conversation toward lighter topics, but every attempt was met with cold indifference. Dad watched Glenn closely, as if searching for flaws, while Mom seemed to rehearse a disapproving speech in her head. After dinner, I knew the confrontation I had been dreading was imminent. As we were saying goodbye, Dad cleared his throat. "Mia, could you come with me to the study for a moment?" My stomach churned as I followed him, with Glenn trailing behind me. Once inside, Dad closed the door, his expression as stern as ever. "Mia," he began, "I need to be honest with you. We've always had certain expectations for you and your sister. It's important for the reputation and future of our family." I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "I understand, Dad, but Glenn makes me happy. Doesn't that mean something?" Dad's face grew even sterner. "This isn't just about happiness, Mia. It's about making decisions that align with the family's values and the future we've envisioned." Glenn, though he may be a good person, doesn't fit that image. Mom nodded, her eyes fixed on me. "We've been very clear about what we expect from you. If you choose to be with Glenn, you must understand that it means going against everything we've worked for and what we believe is best for you." Glenn's concerned gaze met mine. "Mia, what are they saying?" Dad took a deep breath before delivering his ultimatum. "You have a choice, Mia. Either you stay with us and follow the path we've laid out for you, which includes ending this relationship, or you choose Glenn and leave this family behind. It's a difficult decision, but it's yours too Make Dad's words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always known this moment might come, but facing it was entirely different. My heart pounded as I tried to process the ultimatum. Glenn's hand found mine, offering comfort and solidarity. Whatever you choose, I'll support you, he said softly, but I hope you choose what truly makes you happy. The sincerity in his words and his unwavering support left me in turmoil. I had spent my whole life trying to meet my parents' expectations, but now I was being asked to choose between my happiness and their approval. It was a choice no one should have to make, but it was my reality. As I left the study, I knew the decision ahead was monumental. It wasn't just about choosing between Glenn and my parents, it was about my future and what I truly wanted for my life. The tension and uncertainty were suffocating, and the path forward felt both daunting and exhilarating. The following days were filled with sleepless nights and endless contemplation. I knew this decision would define the rest of my life. Whatever I chose would come with its own set of challenges and sacrifices, but for the first time I felt a spark of hope and determination to live a life true to myself. The days after the ultimatum were some of the hardest of my life. Every conversation with my parents felt like a battle. Every word exchanged laden with unspoken tension. I knew choosing Glenn meant walking away from the only life I had ever known, but the more I thought about it, the clearer my path became. Glenn and I spent long hours discussing our future, everything from the small details of daily life to our dreams and fears. His unwavering support made me feel less alone in such a tumultuous time. He was my rock, the person who made me feel like I was finally living for myself instead of trying to meet everyone else's expectations. One night as we sat together in the cozy living room of the small apartment Glenn had rented, he took my hands in his. Mia, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. I know this isn't easy, but I believe in us. His words were a balm for my troubled heart. I just don't know how to tell them, I admitted, my voice cracking. I know it'll hurt them, but I can't keep living under their shadow. Glenn gently squeezed my hands. It's not about hurting them, it's about choosing your happiness. You deserve to live a life that feels right to you. The decision was made. I couldn't live a life defined by my parents' expectations anymore. I was ready to embrace a future with Glenn, even if it meant leaving my family behind. That weekend, I made the difficult decision to have one last conversation with my parents. I wanted to face them directly so they could see my determination and hear my reasons for choosing Glenn. My heart pounded as I entered the family home. My stomach and knots. Mom and Dad were seated in the living room, their expressions a mix of concern and anticipation. I took a deep breath and began. I've made my decision. I'm choosing Glenn. I can't keep living a life that isn't true to who I am. Dad's face hardened and Mom's eyes filled with tears. Mia, you're throwing away everything we've worked for, Dad said, his voice heavy with disbelief. Don't you see the impact this will have? I shook my head and responded firmly, my voice low but resolute. I see the impact, Dad, but I have to live my own life, not the one you've planned for me. Glenn makes me happy in a way I've never felt before, and I can't ignore that. Mom's tears flowed freely, her voice trembling. We just want what's best for you. We thought we were guiding you toward a successful and fulfilling life. I understand, and I said, my heart breaking, but your vision of what's best for me isn't the same as what I need for myself. I love you both, but I have to follow my own path. The conversation ended in a heavy silence. My parents, deeply hurt and disappointed, struggled to comprehend my decision. It was clear they weren't ready to accept my choice. The weight of our conversation hit me hard. I knew that by choosing Glenn, I was closing a chapter of my life with my parents. Subscribe for more revenge stories. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was a necessary step toward my happiness. Glenn and I moved forward with our plans, though the beginning wasn't easy. We faced the challenges of starting over, finding a place to live, and adjusting to our new life together. Despite the difficulties, we felt a profound sense of freedom and satisfaction. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by Glenn's friends and family. It was very different from what my parents might have imagined, but it was perfect in its simplicity. As we exchanged vows, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing I was making a choice that was truly my own. The months that followed were a time of adjustment and new experiences. Glenn's carpentry business began to flourish after he completed advanced training, which significantly increased his income. It was inspiring to see him thrive, pouring his heart into the craft he loved. His dedication and attention to detail didn't just result in beautifully crafted furniture, they also reflected his commitment to building a better life for us. We bought a modest home on the outskirts of Chicago, nestled in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets. The house wasn't large, but it was ours, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with memories. Every corner carried a piece of our journey. Glenn even built a custom dining table for us, his first major project in our new home. Sitting around that table during meals, we often talked about our dreams and the life we were creating together. I started working as the coordinator for his business, managing schedules, liaising with clients, and handling finances. It felt good to contribute in my own way, to be part of something we were building together from the ground up. Despite the joy and love that filled our lives, a part of me still felt the absence of my parents. Their silence was a shadow over my happiness, a constant reminder of the price I had paid for my freedom. Every day I held on to the hope that they would come around, that they would see the life I had built and realize I was happy. But weeks turned into months, and their absence remained a painful void. I convinced myself that perhaps with time they would reach out, and then one unexpected day they did, but it wasn't in the way I had imagined. My parents reached out to me, not out of love or reconciliation, but in a state of desperation. My father had been caught up in a scandal at the university, one that had tarnished his reputation and left him jobless. Mel and her husband had disowned them, unwilling to be associated with the fallout. With nowhere else to turn, they came to me as their last hope. It hurt to see them standing before me, their faces hollow and weary, seeking refuge from the emotional storm they were in. For a fleeting moment, the child in me wanted to comfort them, to be the beautiful daughter who would fix everything. But the pain and betrayal they had inflicted on me were still fresh in my heart. Memories of their disapproval and the way they had turned their backs on me surfaced like an open wound. I listened to their plea, my heart torn between the past and the present. Their words were filled with regret, but not the kind that sought to mend our relationship. It was regret born of necessity, of desperation. At that moment I realized that, despite their need, I had already made my choice. The life I had built with Glenn was a reflection of my happiness and independence. I couldn't go back to the life they had tried to dictate, no matter how much they needed me. Now I'm sorry, but I can't help you, I said firmly, though my voice carried the weight of sorrow. I've built a new life for myself, and I need to protect it. I can't undo the decisions I've made or go back. Their expressions of shock and pain were the final break in our relationship. It was clear that the ties that once bound us as a family had been irrevocably severed. When I closed the door behind them, a sense of finality washed over me. It was a bittersweet moment filled with the pain of loss, but also the satisfaction of living a life true to myself. With Glenn by my side, I knew I had made the right decision and was ready to embrace whatever the future held. Life with Glenn was a journey full of ups and downs, but every moment filled me with gratitude for the path we had chosen. We settled into our new home, finding comfort in the cozy space we could finally call our own. It wasn't big or luxurious, but it was filled with laughter, love, and the small details that made it unique, like the bookshelf Glenn built in our living room or the herb garden I started by the kitchen window. My role as coordinator in Glenn's business kept me busy, and it was rewarding to see our shared efforts bearing fruit. Glenn's carpentry skills continued to shine, and his new certification allowed him to earn a salary of approximately $80,000 a year, providing us with a comfortable life. We started dreaming about the future, imagining all the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, as we sat together on our worn but cozy couch I looked at Glenn and said, despite everything we've created something wonderful together. Glenn returned my smile, a spark of pride. In his eyes, I couldn't have done this. Without you, our happiness grew even more. When we discovered I was pregnant, the news came as a joyful surprise, and we eagerly prepared for the arrival of our baby. Glenn threw himself into creating the nursery, crafting every piece of furniture by hand, the crib, the rocking chair, even the shelves, all were made with love and care, his way of welcoming the newest member of our family. When our son was born, we named him Sire, a name inspired by Glenn's carpentry work and the tools that had built our dreams. Holding Sire for the first time was a profound moment filled with love and hope. He represented the future we had dreamed of, a new chapter in our lives that brought immense joy. As I looked into Sire's tiny face, I felt a deep sense of peace. Despite the absence of my parents, I had found solace in the life I had chosen. The journey had been challenging, but it had led me to a place where I could truly be myself. One night, as Glenn and I stood together in the nursery, he ran his fingers over the wooden crib he had built and said, "This crib is just the beginning. I'm going to build a future for him that he'll be proud of." I nodded, tears in my eyes, and we'll do it together. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring challenges, but I was ready to face them, guided by love, hope, and the strength we had built as a family. Together we would continue to build one step at a time, knowing that the life we were crafting was more fulfilling than anything we could have ever imagined. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below if you enjoyed the story. Subscribe and like the video to discover more. Your support means a lot.